100% on the 2 Kias. So most of you are doing fabulous.
Fabulous. So
We'll see.
well, I think Riley and Bryn come in late on this day. They do.
What's Canvas?
But they're here. And Bryson.
And Taylor Johnson. She comes in late too.
I think I just answered your question.
Sociology?
Well, if I don't know what Canvas is, I probably don't use it.
I'm sure.
So it's an infant Canvas. Okay, here we go.
Oh.
So let's meet Peter Zenger. Peter Zenger was a writer,
Okay, that was.
and he, in a colonial newspaper, was openly critical of the colonial governor, the royal governor. And the royal governor said, "You can't tell the fine people of this colony about me," and sued him for what's called libel. Does anyone know what libel is? Could the fine New Richmond News newspaper print a front page story about me, about how every day it's alleged that I sell drugs on the street corner? Now, could they report that story?
No, because they don't.
Of course, they could, and then I sue them, and it proves that I'm able to prove that it's not true. Have I just won the libel suit? This is where it gets a little bit tricky. Not only do I have to prove that the New Richmond News was wrong, I have to prove that they intentionally did it. So you have to prove that a newspaper story intentionally, with knowledge that what they were printing was crap, they did it anyway to get you. Okay, and that's the threshold for libel today. Well, that's what Mr. Zenger was being sued for, that all these were lies and that he intentionally did it anyway. His lawyer was a fella named Alexander Hamilton. There's a fabulous play right now in Minneapolis I'm trying to get in. I'm entering the lottery every day. If you win the lottery, you get 2 tickets for $10. I have no chance. But if you can see that play, it's fabulous. It's called Hamilton, right? So this is young Alexander Hamilton, who later on will be one of the generals that defeats the British during the Revolution, who would later on become Washington's right-hand man. That's Alexander Hamilton. But this is young Alexander Hamilton. And he was able to prove to a jury that the stories were true. And the governor said, "Yeah, but so? They're harmful to me." Well, too bad. They're true. And so this begins a journey, which today I would love to see if anyone can connect the dots. Connect the dots. La, 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 la. Connect the dots. La, 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 la. Connect the dots. La, 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 la. You have to hurry because I can't go much higher than that. Can we connect the dots? Oh, I see. You don't really understand what I'm asking. What do we have today that we can look back and see, oh, a newspaper can print things about important people, that it can become public knowledge? What do we have today that protects the New York Times and other newspapers and print media and visual media? What do we have today that protects those news sources, media, from being sued because they could say, but it's true? Or if it wasn't true, we didn't mean it as intentionally harmful. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Can we be a little bit more specific? I heard free speech. I heard freedom of the press. Those are both in the same thing. Yes. Yes. And that's an example of free speech, which is in what? I mean, you're telling me the idea. What I'm asking for is, what am I looking at? When I'm looking at the thing that says you have free speech and you have freedom of the press, what am I looking at? Well, yes, but can we be more specific? What? The First Amendment. The First Amendment guarantee of freedom of the press. And the press is under assault, I would argue, today. Whether it's right-wing nutcases or left-wing nutcases. But we have to be careful because we don't want a government-run press. We don't want an official government version of what happened. That's what they had in Nazi Germany. That's what they have in North Korea. We need an independent, viable press, competing with each other, disagreeing with each other, but that should be welcome in our society. Okay. Any questions here? He was found not guilty, starting this fine American tradition of respecting the press, respecting the media. Ready? 2 slides left. So we're going to make a flow chart here of various colonial governments. And so there were different types of colonial governments. I'm now introducing to you 3. There were royal colonies, proprietary colonies, and charter colonies. I'm wondering if anyone in here can say, I bet I know what that is. That's when. Yes.
I'm guessing the first one because I'm completely I'm going to organize this and you're going to see what I say. Proprietary.
Okay, let's just stop there so we can allow others to digest what you just said. You're right. A royal colony is a colony run by the crown. The British government is running things. The king probably doesn't personally do it, but he appoints someone. The governor is appointed by the crown. Would someone else like to take a shot at what a proprietary or a charter colony is? As a clue, I can tell you we've already covered this. So when we learned about different types of colonies, we may not have labeled them as such, but we did cover them. Go ahead. Close. Of the 2 options, you got the wrong one. Silver medal, though. Silver medal. So just
Proprietary was the company?
yeah, the proprietary colony is the one run by the company. Okay, very good. So imagine Walmartville today, right? That's what was going on. These colonies run by a company. They're where they grew cotton or wacky tobacco or some product that they intended on growing and bringing to the British, making them into finished products and then selling right back to the colonies, which leaves this other one. And again, I would say we've covered it. Looking for maximum participation.
The church.
Permission from the king to do what
Is it the church?
Okay, very good. Religious based. Think Pennsylvania. Think Rhode Island. So you were all right. I don't like how things are being run in said colony. So I go and I ask the crown, can I have permission to start my own colony? And we're going to tolerate Catholics or Jews or whatever. Okay, very good. And now I have the word executive over here. And now I have a second set of things here with legislative. So there's some sort of executive. I'll just choose the word branch. There's an executive branch and a legislative branch to each of these colonies. And so all we got to do is figure out, well, how are they appointed? So in a legislative branch, you'd have an upper house and a lower house. And then what it says here, this will make sense, I promise, as we look at this. In the upper house, in a royal colony or a proprietary colony, the upper house was appointed. The king named the people in the upper house. Or the proprietor, the company, named the people that are in the upper house. In the lower house, if there was a lower house, these were bicameral legislatures. Does that term ring a bell? Has anyone ever heard of that before? What does bicameral mean? What does bi mean? Two. Bicameral. Does anyone know what that means? Or another way of asking this question is, what do we have today? That is an example of a bicameral legislative organization. Yes, can you identify them?
House of Reps and the Senate.
The House of Representatives and the Senate. My next question is, why? Why? Why have two? Why not just have one? Sorry. Why would you create an entire lawmaking body and then say, now any bill you pass doesn't go to the president, goes to this one? Why? You're creating inefficiency. It's like saying, all right, Dad, you're going to decide what's for dinner. And then when you decide, it must pass through Mom. Why? Mom's an idiot. No. I love you, honey. Why would you do that? Why would you create? Have any of you ever wondered why? Why do we have a House and a Senate? It's inefficient. It's doubling the workload. Why would you want to double the workload? Another way of asking the same question. Why would you want to decrease the likelihood of success that a bill passes? Yes.
It needs to be good bill.
It needs to be a good bill. I think you're on the right track.
Yay.
Okay, I think we're on the right track here. Any other thoughts?
They don't want it to change.
Can't take advantage.
Very good. So we're going to think this through, right? That second body might see flaws that the first body didn't. Excellent. Yes? Yes, they might see things. Good synthesis. They might see things that you simply didn't miss. I think all of these are true, and I will add on to this. If you have a basic distrust of your government, you don't want it to be efficient. You want it to be inefficient. You want to do things that limit the power of government. That's what our Constitution is. I mean, you think about, they wrote this whole Constitution, and then they made a list, and here are the 10 things it can't do. And they made a list of things that our government cannot do. You think Nazi Germany had a list of things? By the way, Hitler, you can't do these things. Adolf would have burned that thing. Adolf did burn that thing. Okay? You make a list of things that the government can't do to make it weak. You have a bicameral legislature to make our government weak. Because the second body will say to the first body, that bill you passed, I don't think so. It is intentionally inefficient. Why would you do that? If you have a basic distrust of government. If you have a nutcase king named George III, who's crazo, so you rate your own government to limit the power of the government just in case you have a leader who's nuts. We'll just move on. Okay. Or you had an upper house that's elected. So either you had an upper house that's appointed by the crown or the proprietary, or you had an upper house that was elected in the charter ones, right? The lower house, they were all elected by people who own property. You had to own property. Okay. Now I have all sorts of arrows. The royal colony had an upper house that was appointed, and the royal colony had a lower house that was elected. The proprietary colony had an upper house that was appointed, and the proprietary colony had a lower house that was elected. The charter had an upper house that was elected and a lower house that was elected.
Yeah.
I did not make mine this neat.
You're puzzling. Your mom's puzzling. Edit that out. All right. I'm editing out what I just said because that was really stupid.
No, leave it in there.
How do you edit it out?
I'm gonna clip it in the put it on Facebook.
Your mom, Potter.
His Sigmund Freud already said it.
Any questions?
Your mom looks just
Let's keep going.
Wait, what's the charter?
Thank you.
No, mama jokes though, however. Those are funny.
Wait,
I got
Because that upper house is with the charter and the other
Elected upper house, appointed upper house.
Your mom is so stupid.
Stop eating.
Okay. Let us take a look at the inevitable war that will occur between Britain and France, which will lead to the British going into debt because wars are expensive, which will lead to the British taxing the Americans because, after all, if we fight the French in the French and Indian War, it's on you're the ones who benefit, so don't you think you should pay the taxes? Which leads to the Americans saying, no, we don't like taxes, which leads to the British saying, well, too bad, we're going to tax you even more, which leads to the Declaration of Independence, which leads to the Revolutionary War. Here we are. If you want to look at the beginning of the story that ends the relationship between the British and the French, you could, as a major chapter, include the French and Indian War, which this slide is beginning to tell us about. So taking a look at this map is useless. This is the one that I think is of interest. You have the original 13 British colonies. They're in red. To its west is a much larger chunk of land. That's the French-controlled area. And then up here is both a blue and a red stripe telling you what? The red is British, the blue is French, and up here we've got blue and red striped. What does that mean? They both claimed it. Very good. There's a disputed claim.
French.
Very good. We're talking about mid-1700s here. So the Declaration was in 1776. This is more like 1750-ish. The Revolution is 25 years away. And you might think, my God, the French, they controlled way more land. They must have greater control than the British. And there are two things to consider before you make that conclusion. The density of population. The British outnumbered the French something like 40 to 1. 40 to 1. And the way that the French viewed their control versus the way that the British viewed their control. The French viewed it as some place to hunt animals, skin them, and sell the animal skins in Europe. So who lives here? Hunters. People that meshed with the natives, married in with the natives, learned the native language, treated with them, interacted with them, did not necessarily dominate them. Did not make towns. There are no huge French cities in the blue area. What did the British do? They moved in families. They moved in people that worked on farms. They pushed the Indians away. They built huge cities. It's just a different way of looking at these colonies. So, yes, the British controlled less land, but way more densely populated. The French are very, very vulnerable. Nevertheless, there's this one king. His name is Louis. XIV. Anyone know what number that is? 14. XIV. I'll teach you someday about Roman numerals, but X is 10, I is 1, and V is 5. 10, 1, 5. Why isn't that 16? That's right. So when the I is in front of the V, it means take away. 10 plus 5, take away 1. Romans. Anyway,
He's the 14th one.
he's the 14th Louis.
That's cool.
You know George Foreman? You ever heard of George Foreman?
Yeah.
He has kids. He has something like 9 kids. They're all named George.
Seriously?
All of them, whether they're male or female.
Wait, George.
George and George and George and George. They're all George.
Wait, Foreman? Like
Yeah, George Foreman, the boxer.
the grill?
The grill guy.
Really?
That George Foreman, who
He's
back when I
not-
was your age was a boxer, not a proprietor of a grill.
Like a grill, like the same George Foreman that Michael Scott steps on?
That's the one. Michael Scott step. Yep, that's right. Okay.
When you want to
he-
smell of bacon in the morning.
Louis was a bit more of an expansionist, and he wanted to invest in developing the blue area. And so he makes alliances with certain Native American groups, namely the Huron. Meanwhile, the British, kind of amazing, they are able to forge an alliance with another group called the Iroquois. Now, remember what I just told you about the British and their policy, their approach toward the natives? You're inferior to us. We want you out of here. If you're Iroquois, why in the world would you make a military alliance with the British? That's the answer. Very, very good. Know this, you'll hear it a lot. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. It's not that the Iroquois liked the British, it's that they hated the Huron. There's a natural rivalry there. The British can help us beat the Huron. That's what's going on in Iroquois brains. They can help us beat our traditional enemy. Now, I think in hindsight, I think the Iroquois later on would think that was pretty dumb. What we did was pretty dumb. But they don't have hindsight, so they don't have that. Okay, so we're setting it up for conflict here. Now, where would you guess if I had one of you walk up here and say, it was here, and you're pointing at a certain spot? My asking is this question: where would this conflict probably occur between the British and the French? Would anyone like to walk up here and say, there? No. You are raising your hand, walking up to television, and say, here it is. Not her, and not him, or her. Nothing personally, but I want maximum participation.
Wait, say the question.
Don't be frightened. I want you to walk up to Mr. TV and point somewhere.
That's not a TV.
What do you call it?
A board.
Powder.
It's not definitely not
Oh,
a board.
yes. Be my guest.
A mobile.
Point at
smart-
Mr. TV.
Jack,
And have no fear if you're wrong. Who cares if he's wrong? Big deal. At least he had the guts to do it. Huh? Where?
All the striped ones.
Oh. No. Yes. Hold your hair just.
That's okay.
Right there.
She's right.
She pointed at
She is right. I think. She kind of glanced over it. Yeah. Wouldn't it be the border between the two?
Yes.
Wouldn't that be where conflict occurred, where they meet up with each other? Because here's the thing. What the British did was they built a series of forts right on the border. And what the French did was they built a series of forts on the border. It's the same border. So you have military forts of the British and the French in very, very close proximity with each other. And remember, back then, they didn't have this thing called GPS. So, oh no, I think I'm in the red area, but I could be miles off and really be in blue area. Map makers were maybe the highest paid profession at this time. Today it would be, I don't know, quarterback for the Packers. But back then, if you were a map maker, you were really well paid. It's a highly respected position. And this is the story of one of those guys who had a map that said he was in red area, and he wasn't. He was in blue area. But he built a fort for the British. And the French came along and said, you have your fort in our area. We must kill you. Do you have a Holy Grail? What? I said, do you have a Holy Grail? No, I fart in your general direction.
I get it.
That guy built a fort right here.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right there. He does it right there. I don't know how he does it, but when I stand up, there's no tack. And when I sit down, there's a tack. He built a British fort right there. He built it in blue area.
Who built?
That's a great question. Anyone want to take a shot? I'm telling you, you know this guy.
George.
Why would King George get in a boat and cross the Atlantic and personally build a fort?
Columbus.
George Washington.
Columbus.
Young, lost George.
Jack.
Okay.
It's your hood. I think you're a gang member. Okay.
Nice.
We will continue the story, but yes, young George Washington was an officer in the British Army. He later on would betray his own country, supposedly.
Weren't all the rebels former members of British?
Well, yes, I suppose, but George was somebody,
Oh, he was like,
right? And I mean, he was somebody, right?
he was just-
Later
He's
on in
gonna
this
be
class,
a-
we will study a man by the name of Robert E. Lee who would do the same thing. As a young man, Robert E. Lee fought for the U.S. Army against Mexico, Mexican-American War. A couple decades later, he betrays his country and secedes with his native state and fights against them. And that's one reason. That's one reason why some people today look at Robert E. Lee kind of sympathetically. They see him as another version of George Washington, someone who betrayed his original nation to join with the group that he really is part of. And 1 year ago, this is where it kind of comes home to us. 1 year ago in Charlottesville, a group of people tried to tear down a statue of Robert E. Lee because they said, nah, he's not young George Washington. He's a traitor to his country. Why are we building statues for this guy? And they tried to take the statue down. And then somebody else got in his car and ran over a couple of those people. And that was Charlottesville 1 year ago.
I remember watching video in civics.
Yeah, then they.
Yeah, we did.
Sad stuff. Okay. That's it for note taking. Is there any question about what we covered?
That note on the other page. I didn't know that was.
So now I'll give you a 2-minute little break here. In 2 minutes, you have your revised first paragraph, your revised second paragraph, and your good faith attempt at third paragraph out on your desk. 2 minutes.
I typed mine.
Yep.
Connor, do we need to show you like the different graphs we have?
You don't need to show me anything.
Oh yeah.
I just came in late from a conflict.
So you'll, if you want, you can watch the video.
Can I go to the bathroom?
You can do whatever you need to do. We're meeting when the big hand is on the 5.
What time does the bus leave today?
I don't know.
There's a game to do?
JD doesn't.
We have a quad.
Basically, making this people sacrifice.
What's the second paragraph about? So like I don't. There's a day where I don't have CIS. So basically, we got homework and I did not. So what's the second paragraph about? Oh no, I haven't done it.
No.
I have like first one that has both sides. In my opinion.
You may as well do it if you have the
You want that? Yep. I can. So what we're going to do is same thing as before. We're trading, evaluating each other. That's it.
Eve, can I see your second paragraph?
Connor, that's the attendance. There's 2 people done, but I don't know if they're done or if they have conflicts or what.
Soren Davies, did you walk in here?
Oh, and I marked Riley and Bryn here, even though they're not, but they have conflicts.
You know that for certain.
I know that they're here.
How about Chandra Wiswell? Did you walk in? She is legitimately absent. How about Ethan Ashton? There we go. Yeah.
Can I see your second paragraph?
Okay, so broken record time here. This shouldn't shock you. What I'm going to have you do is look at your own paragraph. Now, this would be third paragraph. Well, first of all, did you write the thing? And, you know, when I'm in the flex room, resource room, whatever you call it, some of you are coming out to me, do I have to write it? And I always say the same thing. No, you don't have to write it. But I would, because if you're done with your good faith attempt right now, you have the advantage of having a fresh set of eyes. Look at that thing and see things that you're not seeing. Okay. So the intention here is look at your third paragraph with fresh eyes. Do you have a topic sentence? And remember now, if you're writing it the way I originally recommended, which isn't a requirement, but if you write it as disagree, disagree, agree, agree, the third paragraph is author number 1, the one you disagree with, topic number 2. So you would say something like, Zinn mistakenly believes that the motive for European colonization was based on economic prosperity. or something like that. Okay, or whichever historian mistakenly argues that. Blah 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 blah. Okay, do you have a piece of document evidence? Don't quote. Paraphrase. Now, I'll again say this, that some of you showed me your essays in the flex room, and your paraphrasing was a quote without the quotation marks. That's quoting! In fact, it's worse than quoting. It's plagiarism. At least when you put the quotation marks, you're admitting where you got the information. You have to say the same thing without saying the same thing. If the quote is, he sure is smart, your interpretation better be, he ain't dumb. Okay, you got to say what the author's saying in your own words. Okay, and then historical example that appears to prove that it is valid, and drench it with words that say, here's what it seems to be doing, right? That's analysis, right? And then gut punch the historical example, which proves it's ultimately not true. You find that wherever. You find that in another document that you're not using. You find that in one of those 5 handouts that I gave you. You find it in your book. You find it in your notes. You find it on Google, which, again, you must give. Okay? Once you're done, I will call on you in just a second. Once you're done, give it to somebody else. Have them look at it. And by the way, do it again. Have somebody else look at it. Man, the more people that look at this thing, the better. And that includes alumni of this class. I had several people in the flex about an hour ago looking at your stuff. That's great. Okay, question.
So when we're finding the evidence or the historical evidence, are we proving that historical evidence is false, or are we proving that their analysis?
Okay, that's a good question. So he asked, are you proving with your refutation historical evidence that the previous historical evidence is not true? No. Because the historical evidence is supposedly true. But what you're doing is you're saying, yeah, but...
Is it?
Okay, I'll give you a quick one. Some people claim that the Vikings are a superior team to the Packers. Now, I'm going to prove it with a piece of historical evidence. Their stadium is beautiful. It seats this many people, and it's this modern and all this stuff. Now, are you going to say, but that's not true. It's actually a dump because it doesn't seat that many. No, what you do is you say, however, and now you present a piece of evidence that doesn't refute the evidence that they have a new stadium, but that they're a superior team. The Packers win Super Bowls. You see, the second piece of evidence did not refute the first piece of evidence. The second piece of evidence refuted the claim. Okay. Okay. It's the claim you're refuting. I mean, you can't have a piece of evidence that Columbus dismembered natives that didn't find enough gold, and then point out, no, he didn't. Yes, he did. He did do that. But is there another piece of evidence that would seem to support the claim that, but he was a brave and noble guy because common practice at the time, maybe? Whatever. Okay, and then broken record time here. Here we go. Once you get your own version back, revise it. And then I want paragraph number 4, good faith attempt for tomorrow. Come on, you stick with me and this class will work. Fall behind and you're going to be struggling. That's good. Glad you said that. Okay, here we go. Off you go. By the way, don't forget, there is also a packet due on the 21st that's on the Lexington thing. You're not writing the essay, by the way. You're just answering the questions in the packet.
Are we just working on this the rest of the time?
Yeah.
So I can go sit on the couch?
Yes and yes.
Okay.